for your Stanley planes. So I'm going to start out talking about the number 5 through number 8, including the fractionals, which, by the way, those are all the same size and they're pretty consistent as far as the sizing goes, with some minor variations really from the early types all the way through the late ones. And we're going to highlight some of those differences, and that's really what I want to focus on. So that way, when you find a tote out in the wild, or you find a handle, you know, whether it's at a flea market or wherever, or if you inherit a plane, however you acquire it, you'll be able to identify within a certain range where that particular handle or tote came from. So it won't necessarily be, hey, this is a type 9 handle, but it will at least get you in the ballpark so that you have an idea of what you're looking at. This is your telltale sign. Obviously, this tote has been repaired, and I think they did an overall really, really good job on that. The seams are wonderful. And we're going to talk more about tote repairs later. But the biggest telltale sign is going to be how thick that base is. And so just by way of comparison, here's a later one. You can tell that is pretty fat there. And when you see that, you're going to know right off. And also, another thing is what I like to call the forward lean. So this section right here on the front of the tote really leans forward a lot. This is even a type 9 right here. And that one you can see still has more of a lean, whereas by the time we get to the 10s and the type 10s and type 11s, they start to lay back a little bit or lean back a little bit. But the main takeaway here is that thick base, you know, when you see that you're looking at an earlier tote. And then as we progress through the different types, again, I just talked about that forward lean. Now I'm going to show you side by side against a slightly newer one, and you'll see that the lean is starting to lay back, it's starting to stand back up a little bit more, you know, perhaps for ergonomics, perhaps they determined that it was more comfortable. But you can also see where this type 9 is actually a little bit shorter as well. This is off of a really torn up, busted down number 8. And you can see, you know, I've got the bases lined up, but you can see where not only is it leaning further forward, but it's also a little bit shorter. So that's important when you're shopping for a tote screw to know that you're going to need a slightly shorter screw in order to work there. Also, your horns at this point are still a little bit longer. And I'm going to show here in just a couple minutes, I'm going to show you the difference in when they started getting, when the horns started shrinking there. Another variance that's worth noting, and it's kind of hard to capture in the video here, but the base on the older ones is actually slightly shorter. So the holes still line up between your main handle screw or tote screw and your forward tote screw. They still line up, but they are ever so slightly shorter. And so that's important to note as well. And sometimes when they're installed on the body, it might not look quite right. It might overhang the front, or it might hang back a little bit, and it might not look quite right, but it is correct. And there is definitely some variation there. So definitely nothing to stress about. So once we get to the type 13, type 14, so the Sweetheart era, you can see just ever so slight remnants of where that sticker was, which was installed on the Sweetheart era planes. And so we've still got the longer horn, and we've still got the lean, kind of lean back a little bit, still have the longer base. So this is going to be your type 13, type 14 era. And then the next adjustment, or the next change that you'll see, is where the horn actually gets shorter. And so if you look at those side by side, you can see that that horn that has clearly not been modified, because that's a, you know, fairly almost unused tote, which is kind of hard to believe. But you can definitely see where it has gotten shorter. And so as we progress through, that's what you're going to see, is the shorter horn. And that is even more obvious, those changes on the 3 and 4 size. And then I do have this aluminum one. This is just one variation that Stanley offered. These were popular in schools or in learning environments where you might have had concerns about new folks dropping a plane or having it get knocked off a bench. Obviously a lot harder to damage an aluminum tote. So that was one variation that was offered. And then also, I don't have one to show, but also ebonite, especially say on like your 602s, you would have had, and it was actually in and, you know, marked as the Board of Education. And so that was another variation and another way to protect, because obviously these totes were expensive to replace. Got some other variations that I'm going to highlight better when I go over the number 3s and number 4s in the next segment. But just so you can see the progression, when you get to the Type 20s, those are the ones with the dark blue beds, typically have a lever cap with a yellow background behind Stanley. If you're familiar with the type studies, you know that, and I'll be doing more videos on those in the future, breaking down the type studies and showing you what those different examples look like. But beyond the Type 20s, you had the Cordovan or Cordovan period, and you can see to the right over there is going to be that maroon bed. And this is what the totes or handles look like on this period, and these are actually the same as what they look like on the Type 20s. I don't have a 20 to show you, but the biggest change is going to be that the top of the handle is rounded over, and as you can see, it does have the shorter horn. It's not as long as the early models. Still have the same basic pattern and the same basic look. Obviously not rosewood here. Still have the front is flattened out here where the forward tote screw attaches. So that's your post Type 20 there. And again, Cordovan or Cordovan period. Next up, we're going to talk about the number 3 and number 4 size. So next up, we're going to be talking about your size 3 and size 4 totes. Those are mentioned synonymously a lot, because the later models, they were compatible with one another and you could swap them out between a 3 and a 4. But of note, your earlier ones, you couldn't do that because the number 3 was actually shorter than the number 4. And I'm going to show you that to you right here. You can see this is an early 3 that the horn has been modified, you know, probably got chipped, and so they just rounded it off. But that's an early 3, and as you can see, it's a bit shorter than the number 4. So you're not going to be able to fit that number 4 size tote on an early 3 because it's not going to fit underneath the lateral adjust lever. The base on that is just a little bit shorter as well on that older 3. So for this 10.5, for example, which uses the same size tote as a 3, it's a B casting, so we know it's a Type 8 era, and so we're talking late 1800s there. And that's your number 3 size handle or tote. It's the same, and it has that same base as this little shorty right here, this number 3 size. Haha, y'all thought you were going to catch me slipping, so let me clarify on that. When I say Type 8 in the B casting, and I said late 1800s, and I meant 1899 to 1902, so turn of the century there. So by now, our number 3 and number 4 size totes, we've decided, are the same size. They're interchangeable between the two sizes. And so we're back in that Type 10 through Type 15, kind of the pinnacle of Stanley's success as far as I'm concerned. And I think a lot of folks would agree with that. Here's a Rosewood tote from that era. And as you can see, got the little bit longer horn there. Got a really great design and a really great look. And for comparison purposes, because we've been talking about these horns getting shorter, here's the variation right there. You can see where the later one has gotten just a bit shorter there. So at this point, your Type 16s and beyond, so we're talking 1933 to say 1961. So that's 16 through 19. You're going to see a lot of variations on your totes, especially what the materials that were being used. So for example, early 40s, World War II, you're going to not see the rosewood nearly as often. They actually went to just a hardwood, and you can see this one's just got a basic finish on it. Rosewood, a little harder to obtain during the war, and no longer going to see the brass barrel nut on those. So instead, you're going to see just a solid steel screw holding that in place. And again, this is just a basic hardwood. Another variation that you're going to see anywhere in this time frame is going to be just a hardwood tote that's just painted black. And then as we progress and we get up into the Type 19s, we're going to see the rosewood make a comeback. I've also heard it referred to as tropical wood. Looks an awful lot like rosewood to me. Feel free to drop a comment there if you've seen in writing somewhere. Still waiting on my P-Tampia to come in so I can verify this, but that looks an awful lot like rosewood to me. What say you? And for tight 20s and beyond, we talked about that under the size 5 and up totes, and you saw how it had the rounded off top. You see the same feature on your number 3 and number 4 size from type 20 and beyond. So no changes there. If anybody has any questions, comments, anything that you've either seen different or that you've read different, feel free to drop a comment down below. And of course, you can always visit my Facebook page, Just Plain Fun, the Parts Division. I'm all for an open dialogue. So if y'all have had a different experience or you've read something different, let's hear about it. Next up, we're going to be talking about tote repairs. So I'm guessing that everybody watching this video loves to hit a yard sale, an estate sale, a flea market, or even looking online and find that beat up old plane that they can bring back to life. And let's face it, the majority of the time when we find a plane in the wild, the handle looks about like that. Either the horn is sheared off the top, like what you see here, or it's broken in half like this, or worse, it's broken in half and the horn is either chipped real bad or it's broken off. And so the way I figure it, you've probably got about half as many intact serviceable rosewood original totes as what there are planes out there. It might even be less than that. And so that's why as a parts guy, it's going to be pretty hard to pry an original intact rosewood tote from my grips. I'm going to charge you a lot for it because I know how hard they are to come by. I've got, probably 50 planes upstairs that I could complete if I just had a rosewood tote. And so that's where repairs come in, and also rebuilding a tote from scratch. I mean, theoretically, we're all woodworkers, right? Except for the people that just collect planes, I guess. So some woodworkers will actually make their own tote. This would be an example of a shop-built tote out of what appears to be walnut. Did a pretty good job of mimicking the original Stanley design and looks pretty good. So that's just one example. And you also have repairs, of course. And so I've got some examples here. You saw this one early on in the video. It's one of my favorite repairs. Got that nice big stripe on there. I have some maple, and I just think that looks fantastic. The seam is real solid there. And like I said, that's just one of my favorite repairs there. Another one of my favorite repairs is this one right here. It was done by William Walker down in Florida. And as you can see, he used a veneer to fix a chip on the horn there. And I just love that. And by the way, Will Walker offers tote repairs. So if that's something that you're interested in, maybe you either don't have time or you don't have the necessary experience to repair your own tote and you want to have it done, Will is offering his services. This is another one that he did. You see the nice stripes there, and then replaced the horn on it and did just a great job lining up the hole. If you've ever tried to do this before, you know that it can be a real challenge in itself, re-drilling that hole and making sure that it's centered. But just a great job on this one. Another thing I like about it, this was original when I found this plane, or when I acquired this plane, had the 21 etched into each side. I just imagined that was part of some educational institution or something where you could check out a plane. You could check out number 21. So I just love that handle. But yeah, let me know, reach out in the comments, and I can put you in touch with Will Walker if that's something that you're interested in pursuing. And another great guy is Gordon Belt, who actually did this repair for me. This one's going to be one that's going to be tough to let go because I just love this repair. You can see where it was chipped, and we've got a piece of wood there integrated into the horn, and then the nice contrast there of the maple. This is another one of Gordon's repairs, and just did a wonderful job of repairing this crack where it was actually, this break where it was broken clean in half, and then got the rosewood to match there so the seam is hidden pretty well. And Gordon also does repairs, but I think his lead times are a little bit longer because he's a pretty busy guy. And that's not to say that Will isn't busy, but I think he does have more time. He'll make your tote repair a priority. So let me know if that's something you're interested in. And the last thing that I want to cover is cleaning up a tote. I get this question a lot, especially from folks that are relatively new to the hobby. And then they ask, you know, what do you use to clean up your handles or totes? And my answer is I don't really do a whole lot of cleanup because I am of the opinion that less is more. And that's kind of my catchphrase. But when I do clean one up, like if it's got some really obnoxious paint that I just can't handle, like bright orange paint or something, what I do is you go ahead and use acetone. And my only disclaimer on this is just make sure that you dispose of your rags properly so you don't burn down your shop. But acetone with a rag will remove pretty much any finish from a rosewood tote, and it will leave it just a blank slate for you to work with. And then, like I said, I'm a less is more kind of guy. So this is my workhorse for my shop. This is my number 5 that I use on just about every project. And a nice rosewood tote on there. And that is nothing more than just Johnson's paste wax on there. And that's the only thing that I'll put on one. I know some guys that do some really, really great work with refinishing them, but that's just not me. So I'll use Johnson's paste wax, or another option that I'll use sometimes is the Renaissance wax. And it's kind of in that same family, at least to me, as the Johnson's paste wax. But that's all I do. And then when I'm applying it, I'll put on a layer, let it dry, and then just buff it out. And then maybe put on a second, a third, a fourth layer to get the look that I'm going for and to protect the wood so that it's not sitting around naked. So I appreciate y'all tuning in. I know this video was a little on the longer side. If you made it all the way through, good job, because I got a little long-winded there. But appreciate y'all stopping by. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share this video, etc. if you feel inspired to do so. And if you haven't heard, I'm now offering 5%, minimum 5% off your order if you are a subscriber to this channel. So make sure that you let me know that when you contact me. And I look forward to speaking with y'all, whether it's in the comment section or on my Facebook page, Just Plain Fun, the parts division. So thanks, everybody.